Welcome, champions, to the next overview and tier list ranking, featuring the newest champion. This is where we'll break down their mechanics and place them in my overall tier list for every champion in the game. But before we dive into that, I want to bring up a recent change. Nova, who got nerfed, or fixed, depending on how you look at it. For those who don't know, you can no longer double up on Nova's The Crew with Valentine by taking Nova's first specialization and making sure your DPS and Valentine are in different positions for it, or with Artemis observing the two different positions. It is now a singular buff, which means no multiplicative double dipping. So is this by definition a nerf or a fix? Well, it's now working as originally intended, which is technically a fix. The problem is how long it took to push out that fix for a game like this. This has been in the game since Season 2, 5 months ago. Sometimes mistakes become Bob Ross happy little accidents and just become a part of the game. And that's long enough to feel like it was here to stay, and therefore worth deep dick investing in her. If something was that far off base what they were intending, that's something that has to be hotfixed right away. Otherwise, people are going to spend their limited resources to capitalize on it. And with no dismantle offered, with making a change that on a surface level appears to be a big nerf, long after its introduction is just kinda blech. Now, all of that being said, she's still, even after the fix, one of, if not the, best positional buffers in the entire game. She's still worth the investment, and I ranked her position on my tier list, not even considering this unintended mechanic. But if you noticed a drop in your overall DPS and didn't know why recently, here it be. Anyway, let's talk about Evandra, the chaotic neutral half-elf fighter in Seed 5. She wraps up our trio of the One for All crew through the Awful Ones affiliation. But does that mean the Awful Ones is now full up on members? Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Evandra serves the group as a support, tank, and gold find champion. Her primary attack has her lunge her trusty sword at the closest enemy to your formation, hitting all nearby enemies. Her ultimate summons a mechanical guard to charge toward the party. Then she moves up to attack the guard and disarms them and defeats them. She then uses that arm as a bludgeoning weapon for the next 15 seconds instead of her sword, dealing an additional 3 seconds of bud damage and reducing her attack speed cooldown by 2 seconds, as well as increasing her main damage buffing formation ability, Freedom's Fury, by 100% for the duration, which we'll cover right now. Freedom's Fury, as I said, is her primary source of damage buffing, granting increased damage to neutral champions along the good and evil axis. Always remember, when it comes to those who are neutral, you can use Corazon to make any good or evil champion count as neutral for such buffs. That being said, Corazon isn't the greatest buffer, so it's usually a handicap to have to do so. And as this is her only source of damage buffing, it makes it a bit limiting. For her tank tag, she has Never Completely Armless, where the first time in an area, her health drops to 0, you know, that red bar that keeps you alive in every game you've ever played. She instead only loses her arm, returning to full health. Her arm will regrow when you move to a new area, but she'll increase the damage bonus of Freedom's Fury for each second she did have her arm in the current area before she lost it, stacking additively and being applied multiplicatively. The problem with this is, while it does give a massive boost to her damage buffing potential, if she's in a position to die and revives, there is a very high chance she'll just die again right away, before you can really capitalize on that damage buff. You might think, hey, let's just pair her with Baloth so he keeps her alive during the damage buff. But alas, his death save procs first, then hers. So he'll save her, she'll lose her arm, then instantly die. For her gold tag, she gains Find the Secret Stash, where she will increase the group's gold find by a flat amount, then increase it every time a champion in the formation attacks and does not defeat an enemy. This stacks additively up to 120 times, and then is applied as a multiplicative bonus. She also gains the unique trait of being available for any Witchlight adventure, or variant regardless of restrictions, with Evandra the Magnificent. It's handy to have a tank in a pinch at the ready. And a minor thing to mention, with her tank health upgrade in Inspiring Fortitude, she also increases the healing all champions receive by 25%. Sadly, this is a bit of a waste, as the only healer able to put out decent healing shares her seat, so they can never be used together. Her specializations focus entirely on ways to make Freedom's Fury increase its buffing potential. With Carnival Crew, it will be increased for each champion with a total ability score of 78 or less in the formation, stacking multiplicatively, and also allowing all of the Awful One's affiliation to be used in Witchlight adventures, like her Evandra the Magnificent formation ability. Fighting Force will increase the bonus to Freedom's Fury for each fighter, barbarian, ranger, or paladin champion in the formation, stacking multiplicatively and applying multiplicatively. And lastly, Powerful Allies increases the damage bonus of Freedom's Fury for each female or non-binary champion in the formation, stacking and applying multiplicatively. Her equipment will scale up all champ damage, health, Freedom's Fury, and Find the Stash, as well as a specialization and ultimate cooldown reduction. She does have quite a few feats though, which really isn't a surprise for someone with the 3 important roles she has. She gains an int feat, which is also important because it will make her viable for Strahd. Everything else is really just a standard buff to formation abilities and common feats found for her roles in Overwhelm, Health, and Flat Gold and Damage. So let's talk about her event, the Great Modron March. This time around we have Evandra, Nordom, and Mehen as options. An interesting group. Evandra is a restrictive but multi-purpose champion. Nordom is a must-have if you are leveling up your Modron cores, but becomes borderline useless after that. Mehen is decent, but in my opinion not the greatest, unless you're focusing on Farida, in which case she's a must-have for your roster. A lot of unique little niches to suit very specific needs should you have them. Full epic who you can, but as far as who to focus on, it's pretty up in the air. Absolutely get Nordom up and running if you have Modron cores to level, but other than that, Do keep in mind it's Mehen's last year before he is retired to only being available through time gates. Now what about her achievement and variance? Her achievement requires her to detach 100 arms, and this will count with either her detaching an enemy's arm with her ultimate, or detaching her own arm with her death save mechanic. So just either spam that ult, or watch her die over and over. Her variants follow the trend of her being forced in your formation, able to be moved but not removed. Her first is very simple, aligning with her Freedom's Fury, only allowing neutral champions to be able to deal damage. There are plenty to choose from, and if you're desperate, she starts in the formation and is herself neutral. The second will, if you have them unlocked, throw Antreus and Nixie in the formation with her to symbolize that she's their tank. 1 to 2 mechanical guards will spawn with every wave, not dropping gold or counting toward quest progression. Constructs will also move at 300% speed and deal 300% more damage. Her third lines up with her specializations, only allowing you to use female, non-binary, fighters, rangers, barbarians, paladins, or have a total ability score of 78 or less. Like her affiliation so far, this is quite a large pool to choose from, so this shouldn't be a problem for anyone. Her availability isn't the greatest, available for all but one of the Day 1 Trials restrictions, and for patrons only Evandra naturally and Strahd with a feat. Her permanent availability for Witchlight certainly helps though, and the fact she can bring in her affiliation with her there. She's a tank that shares a seat with one of the best tanks in the game, Briv, and a restrictive just okay buffer who shares a seat with one of the better buffers in the game, Valentine, who is also a gold find champion to contend with for her gold farming, though they are fairly close in that regard. She'll fit right in if you've taken to making Nixie your DPS, but other than that, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a solid use for her other than Azaka farming, where you're probably using Valentine anyway. I'm putting her somewhere in the middle of C tier. Now with Evandra also comes the second Emergence event, and this time we're hunting down, fitting for the current event, Mordrons. If you've seen my video on the first Emergence event, you know I have some issues with it. I'm not going in as deep in this video, So if you want to see that breakdown, check it out. This time around there is a slight difference though. There will be 35,000 gems available from drops and 35,000 from daily quests over the next 2 weeks, for a potential total of 70,000. This is higher than the previous, and this is the exact amount we should have had attainable in the first place, in my opinion. So those who are just focusing on the pigments could gain all 10. The problem that persists now, however, is that for those who didn't pay money, there are 2 pigments left over from the last emergence. And also note we are still on support pigments. So we can get 70k this time, but if you did the first emergence, there are now 12 pigments. So we're always going to be behind 2 if this remains the model for future emergence events. But the previous emergence pigments will disappear after the 2 weeks are up of the current emergence. So you'll always kind of be shoehorned into purchasing the previous emergence events, even if you're coming late, because then you're just going to have to work on all 10 of the previous emergence events before they're gone for good. It's really not the greatest model, but if we're always behind 2, but can pick them up in the current event and just maintain it from there, it's not the worst, certainly not the best, especially if you're joining late into the emergence. And even then, it still leaves no room for getting any of the extras like skins or feats. This is only if you want the pigments, which are, in my opinion, the most important thing to pick up. Overall, emergence still leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth personally, but it's at least a tiny bit better. But at the end of the day, you do want to be farming these Mordrons during the event and doing the daily quests, because these pigments are strong. Thanks for checking in today. Rip off the arm of your enemy and hit the like, sub, and bell with it for me. Leave a comment on what you think of Evandra and the One for All crew so far. And always remember, have a hell of a time out there, champions.